Hi guys, with Nigel Farage's Reform UK party rising in the polls and looking more and more likely to form the next government, former Home Secretary Priti Patel from the Conservative Party was asked about joining Reform, and she was pretty clear in her answer. No. Why? Well, because Reform don't represent conservative values. Have a listen to this.
This is effectively now becoming a live reality, policing people's thoughts, speech, etc. That's hurting us. That really is. It's hurting our international reputation. There's a report out there in the US State Department. That's not good for us internationally. And what I would say, you mentioned David Lammy and, how they've handled, how he's looked at Ukraine. But actually this hurts us because it's about Britain's place in the world. It's about global Britain, our reputation. And do not forget, we've always been a country that's been open when it comes to free speech, fighting for values of freedom of belief and all those key things, and also standing up to autocracy in the world as well. So I think, we should be back out there. I'm very vocal about this in my current role and capacity. There is so much more that we can do, should do, and we shouldn't just be hiding behind, dare I say it, the lefty lawyers, the Human Rights Brigade, which I'm afraid has defined this government thus far.
What the heck is the Human Rights Brigade? What is it with the Conservatives and human rights? They want to strip away protections for human rights. They keep banging on about leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. Okay, a few things to say before we move on to the point where she's asked about reform. Priti Patel was calling for the banning of the marches in support of Palestine. So she can't rant and rave here about, what about free speech, when you were actually supporting the idea of banning people from protesting. You want to deny people their freedom of expression. So you don't get to turn around now and complain about the government doing it. Now, is the government at fault here? Yes, they certainly are. We saw with the prescription of Palestine Action, this is a serious issue that needs to be sorted out. There is an encroachment on human rights, on free speech. There are measures that the Conservatives started out and the Labour government have not rolled back on. So this is concerning. But a lot of these problems started with the Conservatives. She talks here about the United States, pointing to the United States as someone critical of the UK. The same United States that is banning people from entering the country if they express the wrong view, deporting individuals for thinking the wrong way and posting it on social media. And finally, of course, they deported individuals without due process. That is not exactly the example of free speech and democracy you should be pointing to. And then finally on this, before we move on, she's a Brexiteer and she's complaining about Britain being diminished on the world stage. You couldn't make it up.
And finally, and just briefly, your party is languishing in the polls. I think I forget what it was the last time I looked, about 18%, 18%. Are you not tempted to join Reform?
No.
Why not?
We lost the election last year. It's going to take a long time. I call it the hard 9 yards, basically, in terms of, climbing Mount Everest. Some days there's more oxygen than other days. We have to re-establish our credentials and credibility with the British public, who felt very let down and disillusioned by us. And to do that, we have to be the genuine advocates of conservative values and beliefs. This isn't about joining other political parties that are not conservative.
They're doing very well.
They might be, but they're not they're not conservative in their instincts, their values, their beliefs, and where they're going. We are. And we believe in fighting for those values. In the same way, Rod, that's why we're so vocal about Ukraine, standing up to autocracy, not kowtowing to those countries around the world that are our adversaries, which is exactly what Labour's doing with China right now.
Oh my goodness, the Conservative Party took millions in from Russia. Boris Johnson, allegedly, I think that it's even, we don't even need to use the word allegedly, was paid £150,000 to play tennis with the wife of a former minister from Putin's administration, from the Putin government. I've joked before, maybe she thought she was going to play tennis with Boris Becker, but got Boris Johnson instead. The Conservatives had friends who were very close to their friends of Russia. That's all being swept under the carpet now. But, you can't criticize the Labour Party for having some sort of connections to China when you had connections to Russia, but you don't want to talk about that anymore. But this bigger point here, conservative values, Reform UK don't represent conservative values. What are conservative values?
We have to fight for our values and the beliefs in the same way in which we did in a very successful way in the 1980s. I think, when you look at the geopolitical situation right now, it's no different to the period before the Cold War Cold War ended. 45 to 89, the end of the Berlin Wall, we all thought was a great triumph. I'm old enough to remember all of that, but I do remember what it was like prior to that time all over again. It was conservative values and beliefs, actually with the United States as well, that fought for those freedoms and the battle of ideas, and that's where my party is, and that's where we're going again.
Okay, that's where the Conservatives are going. Backwards, back to the 1980s, it seems. Look, I said before, you need to have a vision. What is the Conservative Party's vision? What are they selling to the public? Because they have to, I think, own up. They have to apologize for what came before, especially if you have the same people in positions of power within the party who were part of the disaster that came before. So if you kicked everyone out, like Priti Patel and Kemi Badenoch and others who were part of previous administrations, in the sense of don't have them leading the party, then you can sell something new. But all we're seeing is people who used to be part of previous administrations, connected to that disaster, trying to sell the public, hey, wait a minute, we're fresh, we're new, we're coming up with new ideas, new policies. We don't hear many of these policies apart from we're the opposite of Labour. Maybe that's what they're hoping will work. But I think we've passed those days when it's Labour or Conservative and back to Labour and then back to the Conservatives. Don't think it's going to work like that anymore. You actually have to have a vision. You have to be able to present something that will win over the public. And just saying we're true Conservatives and Reform UK are not is not going to work. People want a political party that's going to improve their lives, improve the situation. What can the Conservatives do that will improve people's lives? Recently, Andrew Griffith was talking about austerity once again. These people have no new ideas. They're rolling back they're relying on things that they used in the past. And if they continue to do this, they're going to remain irrelevant. Reform UK are doing well because they're saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to stop the bolts. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And the public are willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. The Conservatives have lost the trust of the public. So they have to do something new in order to win it back. And all we're hearing is more of the same. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.